Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Kelsey Doom. I am the president and CEO at the Brookings Area Chamber of Commerce. And we and our Public Affairs Committee are excited to gather so many of us to hear from our District 7 and 8 legislators. So thank you for joining us this morning. Just so you all are aware, we have question slips in the back. If you have a question for legislators, you can see Dan waving over there. You can grab a slip or just raise your hand and our volunteers will bring you a slip of paper and a pen. And then if you have a question to submit, just if you look around, we have a few volunteers, raise your question, we'll come grab it and give it to Larry, who will be helping, Larry Tiedemann will be helping our moderator, Mike Bartley, organize questions. There's coffee in the back, bathrooms are back behind us there. This will run 1 hour. We will have 1 minute for introductions of the legislators, and then each question will give legislators right around 90 seconds. And so hopefully we get through a lot of questions. So we're really excited. Thank you for being here. Thank you to our sponsors. Brookings Economic Development Corporation is a season sponsor for the Brookings Area Chamber of Commerce Public Affairs Committee. And we have Cool Beans as our coffee sponsor for these legislative coffees. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Mike Bartley, who will moderate this morning.
All right. Thank you, Kelsey. And thank you all for attending today. This is part of a forum for you to ask questions, not me. I get to ask them for you. You have to write them down, as she said. So we're going to start with an introduction of each of the legislators here today. We have a couple new ones and some seasoned people. So we'll start with a 1 minute introduction. We'll start with Roger.
I'm Roger DeGroot. I'm from District 7. I'm just finishing up my 4th year. So as you can tell, I'm a newbie. I'm on Taxation Committee and Education Committee. And I really requested to be on the Education Committee, and somebody said, just pick taxation because it's easy. Well, with this year, with all the taxation issues, it's not an easy committee to be on, but it's very interesting, and I'm happy to be here this morning.
Thank you. Melissa?
Good morning. I'm Melissa Heerman, District 7 House of Representatives. I wanted to thank the Chamber and the Public Affairs Committee for setting up this opportunity today. I'm so appreciative, and Cool Beans for the coffee. I also am brand new this year, so we've been learning a lot about a lot of different topics. I sit on the Education and the Health and Human Services Committee, and I'm excited to be able to hear your questions today and give you an update on what we've done so far and what's coming up.
Senator Reed.
Thank you, Mike. Tim Reed. I guess I'm one of the seasoned ones, as you use the term. I kind of like that term, seasoned. So this is my 7th year. I just moved over into the Senate, and I serve on we serve on an extra committee in the Senate, just because of the number of people. So it's been quite a busy year. Even though we're down on bills, it's actually been a very busy year committee-wise, because I sit on Education and Health and Human Services, and then I chair local government. I also wanted to thank the Chamber for putting this together, and it's great to see a really, really good crowd here today.
Thank you. Senator Crabtree.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me there? See if we got this live. There we go. All right. Well, thanks for the opportunity to join you. It's a great crowd today. Appreciate that. And appreciate you being interested in what's happening with your state government and peer. My name is Casey Crabtree. I'm a senator from District 8. Madison is home to me. We serve Lake, Minor, Kingsbury, and rural Brookings County, so that's a little bit different than in the past. In my role in the Senate, I serve as Majority Leader, Chairman of State Affairs, and I serve on Commerce and Energy. This week is a perfect week to hold an event like this. We are at the halftime. Tuesday was the halfway point of our legislative session, and I can tell you right now, folks, South Dakota is way ahead on the scoreboard, just like the Jackrabbits were at the end of the national championship game. We've done a lot of great things overall. We've cut some taxes. I think there's $18 million in tax cuts that's happened already. We've eliminated some unnecessary red tape. We've made some critical investments into infrastructure, which will help grow our economy into the future. And we've really focused on some of the toughest issues that our state faces, one of those being workforce. And so appreciate the work of all my colleagues that are up here today and look forward to hearing your questions later.
Thank you. Representative Reich.
Morning. I'm Tim Reich. I live in Howard, South Dakota, and I'm one of the representatives from District 8. Most of you probably don't know me because I'm a new guy, but I was sheriff of Minor County for about 17 and a half years. Then I went to work for the state, the Department of Corrections, 10 and a half years. I was actually the cabinet secretary for 8 of those first 10 and a half years there. Then I went on to the National Guard. I ran the South Dakota National Guard as the adjutant general for about 8.5 years. I served a total of 40 and a half years in the National Guard. So, but I'm due to the legislature. I'm excited about my committee appointments. I'm on House Education, House Judiciary committees. I also chair the House Military and Veterans Affairs Committee, and I'm on the Government and Operations and Audit Committee. A lot of what I've been doing this year is focusing on education and on addressing teacher vacancies. So look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Mills.
Good morning. I'm John Mills, and along with Senator Crabtree and Representative Reich, I serve District 8. I'm in my 4th term, same as Senator Reed now. I have to get used to saying that. And my assignment this year, as far as committee, I serve on the Joint Appropriations Committee, the House Appropriations, and also the Joint Appropriations Committee. So everything money, looking at all of the budgets and all of that. I think it was said earlier, this is a good week. We're at the midpoint. This coming week, we'll be setting the budget numbers, and so we're looking forward to that. It's a great time to be here, and again, I want to thank the Chamber for hosting this.
Thank you. All right, as you know, you've got questions going around. Please hand them to either Commissioner Pierce or Councilwoman back there. Where were we at? Over there. Okay, and they'll get them up here or back in the corner. They'll get them up here, and Larry will get them to us. We have a lot of questions coming in. We're obviously not going to get to a lot of them because we only have an hour in the forum. So we'll start with, and I've advised legislators that they don't have to opine on every question, just the ones that they're most familiar with or might be their committee assignments. So we can move along quickly. So our first one to the legislators is, please explain your thoughts on how the state should provide relief to taxpayers via tax cuts amid the budget surplus. Example would be property tax, food tax, et cetera, et cetera. Looking for the pros and cons. So appropriations would probably be a place to start on this. John?
I'll be glad to start. Thank you for the question. And you're absolutely right. That is the place to start. In fact, I serve on not only on the Appropriations Committee, but was assigned to a work group, a small group of legislators that are studying these various tax cut proposals and the pros and cons of all of them. So we have a tax cut on food. We would remove the state portion of the sales tax on food, 4.5%. There's a range. It would cost the state between $102 and $115 million. That's about the cost of that. The pros are that all of us buy food, and so we all would save some money. The con is that it's fairly difficult to implement. You get into some nuances, like if you buy cheese at the grocery store, that would not be taxed. But if you bought a cheese plate that had been cut up and was along with some other veggies or whatnot, that would have to be taxed. And so it adds some real complexities for the retailers to implement that. So that's the con, I think, probably the biggest con of that one. The general sales tax reduction, that's another option that's being looked at, to take it from 4.5% down to 4%. It was raised in 2016 to 4.5% as a way to add some revenue primarily for the schools. And at the time, we were not collecting any sales tax on the internet. Of course, now we all are. We're paying sales tax on the internet, and the law actually says once we're able to do that, we're supposed to roll the tax back to 4%. This one is more expensive. If we do the whole 0.5% drop, it would cost the state around $170 million, but it's simple to implement. That's the real benefit. And we also could notch it, perhaps not go the full 0.5%. We could do it in increments.
Thank you.
I can talk longer if you want,
Keep the
Mike.
responses to 1.5 to 2 minutes, so that everybody who wants to opine can do so. Anybody else would like to tackle this question? Senator?
Well, I think Representative Mills gave a pretty good overview of where we're at with that. I think what we need to do is maybe just set the table for those of you that aren't out there every day like we are and where we're at. First of all, South Dakota is an extremely low tax state. Our burden is very low and has been because we've been very prudent and very conservative with our work over the last, since 1889. And so I think most of us want to be very cautious with when we look at these things. There is a desire to return that any dollars there that we can back to the public. I think that is definitely where our Senate caucus is, and I'm guessing that's where the House Republican caucus is at as well. And so we need to understand where we're at today. And so when we look at other states around us, Iowa or Nebraska, and they're doing major tax cuts, it's because they tax their people too much for too long. And that's really what we had going on. And so what will happen now is this week we'll see our estimates set, our revenue estimates set by our friends in appropriations. That's really important. So just like when you're at home or in your business, you have to know where you're going to be, looking into the future, right? You can't look into the past when you're setting your future revenues. We got to know where we're going to be so that we can start to lay in our obligations, our priorities, where we want to invest, and also where we can find areas to cut taxes and return those dollars.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Just
Roger?
piggyback onto that, John, and I didn't know if you got to the third tax cut that's out there, and that's the $100,000 one. Did you talk about that one? Okay, there's a $100,000 reduction on property taxes on your first $100,000, and that would raise about, or save about somewhere around $80 to $90 million, and it would save each individual household about an average of $350. This holds the school harmless because they would backfill the money lost in the general fund. This does not affect, some superintendents out here, that doesn't affect your special ed or your capital outlay. It doesn't affect the cities as well. What's interesting about this, and again, I'm new at this, so I'm on House taxation, and there's 5 bills to reduce taxes have come through our committee already. And we send them all on to House appropriation, and then what they do, and I think the senator spoke to this, and we'll sit down. I think we have 2 night meetings this week in the House anyway, on Monday and Wednesday. We take all those tax cuts and then we prioritize and we argue amongst ourselves, all 70 of us, which is best, that we think is best for the whole body.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Not, we'll move on to the second question. The governor has proposed 5% new revenue to K-12 education. However, we know inflation far exceeds 5% and is actually closer to 7.5%. What do you envision or anticipate advocating in new school revenue? Senator Reed?
Thank you. We do know that that inflation has been really tough on schools, and so I think it's important that we do look at, my personal opinion, that we do look at doing more. And that's what's going to happen with, coming up. We're going to start understanding revenue. Then we're going to look at, we call them the big 3, and the school is one of the largest parts of the big 3. And what can we do, for an increase, along with what will happen with some of the sales tax. So it's going to be a little bit of sales tax reduction or property tax reduction. So it's going to be kind of a balancing act. But I hear some folks talking about, within the legislature, that they'd like to see some more go into the big 3, and especially education.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Representative Reich.
Thank you. Well, 5% isn't enough. It's clearly not enough. That isn't going to keep up with inflation, and so we've got to do some more. One of the things I've been working very hard on is addressing these teacher vacancies. At the end of 2021, December 2021, there were 111 teacher vacancies in public schools across South Dakota. A year later, 176. So in December of last year, 176 teacher openings across the state of South Dakota. That's a 58.5% increase. And what are we going to do about that? If we don't even keep up with the needs of our school districts, which 5% doesn't do, we're going backwards. And so we've got to bump that up. I've got a bill I'm trying to work. It's going to be tough, but another way is just to send more money to the schools, and I am really in favor of that, and hopefully we can get that done.
Thank you. Anyone else? Roger?
Well, I have to throw my 2 cents in on this bill for sure. 5% isn't enough. I don't know exactly what the correct number is. It seems like in Pierre there is a flavor to raise that 5% to more. My emails are running 100 to 1 that they would like to see at least an 8% to a 10% increase. I support an increase somewhere in that 7% because right now cost of living is 7.2%, and just to keep up, we need to give our teachers that kind of money. Part of the problem is when we talk about the big three, if schools get 5%, excuse me, that has to go to paying the electricity bills and cleaning the snow off and the gas bills and the increase of insurance. However, when we give increases to the state employees, that just goes to salary. So it's really not, apples and apples. It's if you break it down, 1% increase in the big three costs about $18 million, just about $19 million. And the breakdown between that, and I'm going to round up, is education would be about $8 million, Medicaid providers would be $6 million, and for state employees, it's $4 million. Somehow we need to figure out how we can break education away from those other two and maybe get a higher percent. And that's going to be real tough because that's an education on my part and others that understand it to do with the other House members. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Melissa, go ahead.
It's mostly been said already, and I won't be redundant, but I have heard from a couple of people, why are you arguing 5%? 5% is great. And when you look at through a historical lens of what increases have been, it does sound great. And of course, 5%, we're grateful. But I think the point of this year is it's a little extraordinary. And I also am in support of asking for more than 5%. I don't know if, 7, 8, where it will land. I'm having a lot of emails requesting 8%. So we'll continue those discussions. But I just wanted to add very quickly that I think this is a different kind of year. I think we are faced with a lot of different challenges with inflation, workforce shortages, and childcare issues. And so I also am in support, but for those of you that are like, why are you arguing 5%? I think it's these other extraordinary type of variables that have made this year look different.
Thank you. Any others? We'll move on to the next question. Here, John, go ahead.
I would just add, briefly that at this point in the session, it just comes down to making choices. We have nursing homes that are closing. They need money. We have our community service providers in Brookings, that would be like Advance. They're really hurting for folks. They need money. And so we only have so much to go around. And what the legislature will do this week is we'll be looking at all of these various priorities and talking amongst ourselves and trying to figure out what is the best fit that will do the most good. And I just want to assure you that that's the goal that we all have. If we can give more to our schools, I think we all would like to do that. But we have to create this balance. We have to treat the people, take care of the people who are at Advance, that kind of thing. So just be aware it's a struggle. Just like your family budget, we got to figure it out, and we'll do that.
Thank you. Any others? We'll move on to an associated question here. Representative Reich mentioned the teacher shortages in the state. This question basically asks you for your thoughts on House Bill 1177, which would allow districts to rehire retired teachers. So what is your thoughts on that bill of rehiring retired teachers? And who would like to start with that? It's your bill, Mr. Reich. You can start with that one.
Well, unfortunately, the bill got killed last week, but it was, and we're not blaming the state retirement system on the teacher shortage. I was very clear about that in my testimony. But if we're going to address this teacher shortage, we got to try something. And 1177 was a bill that would have had a sunset on it, so it would only been allowed to be used for a few years to allow teachers who have been retired for at least a full year. So you have to be retired a year before you even are a candidate for being rehired without having a penalty to your retirement check. And so it went down kind of in flames there, but and I knew it was going to be tough to get out of retirement laws. I'm a South Dakota retiree. I get checks every month for South Dakota retirement system. The last thing I want to do is jeopardize the solvency of our retirement system. But we did shine a light on it. I'm going to continue to shine a light on it, but this bill is dead. And so those of you that liked it, glad, but the people on retirement laws didn't really care for it.
I thought it was going to be reconsidered Monday. It's not? Okay.
Any other questions? At least we got an update anyway. Any other questions on that one or comments? Senator?
I just add to that just a little bit. The idea from that, which I'm thankful Representative Reich brought it forward, was when we met with the Madison School District. Both my kids go to Madison School, and there's a serious issue there. But at the heart of what this is we've got a problem with teacher shortage. We have a problem with workforce, though, in every single industry in South Dakota. And as we look at all the big challenges that we are working on daily out there, and that you face daily, at the heart of all of those challenges is the lack of workers. And so we have to be very careful about how we proceed here, because if you incentivize one particular industry, it's just taking from those others. So we've got to have a bigger vision for tomorrow, and that has to be focused on bringing more workforce to South Dakota, strengthening that economy. And if we do that, then we know we can take care of education, we can take care of the issues that we face with daycare, the issues we face with long-term care or nursing home closing. So that's where you're going to see us focused. And I know that messaging has been coming out, and there's been a lot of bills that we've been focused on across all industries. And that's where we need to be this year, next year, year after that, and long into the future.
Senator Reed?
I'll just add quickly that workforce is a now issue. Like we talked about, trying to bring people into the state, but we also have to think about it long term. And I think our education system is where we focus on. We talked about, raising the amount of what state employees make. Well, at the same time, that'll raise tuition then, because if you work at SDSU, it's a state employee, you're going to get the raise, but you're only going to get part of it because a lot of it's paid through tuition. And so now you have tuition increased. And I think we have to continue, like we did last year, is to make sure that tuition is held at zero or no increase with it. But when we do that increase, sometimes it forces them to do that. So that's something that I hope that appropriations is looking at, the same as they did last year, to make sure that we hold our tuitions flat.
Thank you. Any other comments? We'll move on to another question here. We're going to change subjects a little bit to elections. There's a couple of questions. I'm going to kind of put them together here. Basically, they're asking your positions on any of the election bills. One in particular was House Bill 1199 on post-election reviews, but there are other pending legislation bills. Would anybody like to opine on election bills? We'll let them get a minute to look it up if they'd like.
I guess I'll start. It looks like 1199 is ready to go into House State Affairs, and I haven't looked at that one, but I do know we have one coming from the Senate side, which is Senate Bill 160, post-election audits, and this has been worked on over the over the interim, and it basically establishes a post-election audit, which a lot of states do, and South Dakota doesn't do. The idea behind this is so there's trust in the electronic ballot counting, and it just basically auditors will have a process that they can do auditing after the elections, just to make sure that this is done. And the way that the bill's set up, also that it will fund, the counties will be funded from the state to do this. So that's the basics of 160. I don't know the details of 1199, but 160 out of the Senate, and I think it's passed through State Affairs. It'll be on the floor this week.
Any other comments?
I can speak to HB 1124. So we had this in the House. It passed State Affairs 13-0, passed the House floor 68-0. And this bill was in regard to ensuring that the voting tabulation machines are accurate and are audited. So that is passed through, and it should be showing up in State Affairs, and I did vote in favor of it.
Any other comments? All right, we're going to go back to another one. It's Senate Bill 3 that requires law enforcement to notice our school officials when a student violates a state drug laws. I don't have the bill in front of me, but apparently, has anybody got that up? Okay.
I can go ahead and talk about it.
Senator Reed, go ahead, please.
This bill came out of the Juvenile Justice Study Committee over the summer, which I was part of. And it just makes sure that if there's a student that has done any type of a violent crime, that the school officials are notified about it, or also with drugs and alcohol issues. Now, it's important to note that there's really good communication with our schools and with sheriffs and our law enforcement. That does happen. But we heard there was a few cases where there was times that the school wished they would have known about a student that was coming, for the safety of, also if there is a violent situation, for the safety of maybe the victim of the crime is also in the school. And so schools were just wanting to, it basically went from may to, or from shall, or from may to shall, and just said you have to contact. The other side of this is that can cause issues with law enforcement. There's sometimes that there's things that they're worried about sharing, and it getting into the public as they're working through the case. And so that's where there's a little bit of an argument about it, but it did come out of the Senate 1816, and so it will move on over to House Judiciary.
Anyone else? All right, we'll move on to our next question. We're going to lighten it up just a little bit here. Super Bowl's tomorrow. And I like this question. It says, when will online sports betting be legalized in South Dakota so the tax money / revenue will come to South Dakota versus going to Iowa, et cetera? Who would like to tackle that? I don't have a number on it. They just want to know if sports betting is going to be a bill at some point in time.
I'll
Has been.
specifically, I'll answer specifically to your question of when
Thank you.
will it happen. I think the only way that it'll happen is it gets put on the ballot. I think it'll have to be done through a ballot measure or an amendment to the Constitution to get something like that to happen. You don't see the appetite in the legislature. I think we had one bill and it got last year. Yeah, and it was defeated. And so that's, I think the only way of going forward with that is actually where it gets on the ballot and the people decide.
I would add to that just a little bit. I think Senator Reed is exactly right. And here's a fact. Whenever there has been a question asked on the ballot about whether or not South Dakotans want more to be able to gamble, they've always chose more freedom on that selection. And here we know that there's some folks that have issues with gambling. That's a fact. But by not having it here doesn't save those individuals. We see that transferring over to Iowa instead, or even worse, it is happening on a black market, so to speak, with no regulation and no guidance, and worse, they can run off credit on those situations, and that's probably more dangerous for those individuals. So my heart breaks for those individuals that struggle with that, and so it isn't really necessarily a lighter subject, because there is people that have problems with that, although I think if that gets to the ballot, you'll see South Dakotans ask for more freedom on that.
Anyone else?
I'd better
Representative
chime in because most of the audience probably knows that I'm not in favor of more gambling. I think we have too much already. You see the damage that it causes us with the video lottery casinos at every C-store. And, just adding more won't help us. We need to be going the other direction. And Europe actually is. And so I take some hope that America's going to wake up one of these days and realize that what our founders put into our Constitution, if you read the Constitution of the state of South Dakota, it says, "Thou shalt not gamble." But then the voters in 1989 forgot about that, what the Constitution said, and they changed it to say, however, if the state does it, it's cool. And I don't think it's cool. We see the crime. We see the impacts it's having on families. Our prisons are filling up with people who have trouble with gambling. So I hope we never, ever go that direction. I hope we turn and get smarter and go the other way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? We'll move on to another question. This one is House Bill 1133. 1133 is basically about the Summit and Navigator CO2 pipeline projects and the ethanol industry. Talk a little bit about, if you would, about the eminent domain issue that's surrounding these two projects at this point in time. And do you support the landowners who have a right, who brought this bill? So CO2, carbon capture. Representative Reich.
Thank you. Well, I'll start out on this. We voted on this Thursday, and it passed out. I probably have a unique perspective on this bill because I own land that the Keystone XL pipeline went across. And so I went through the whole process of folks coming in, trying to talk to me as a landowner, and that whole business about, well, how am I going to be compensated for this? So I put that aside, though. That's not a driving factor for me. I go back to, I represent the citizens of District 8. And when you look at that district, Lake Minor, Kingsbury, Brookings, rural Brookings County, got a couple of things. We got the Dakota ethanol plant there east of Madison, and we got Gevo going up by Lake Preston. And those two industries are going to buy a lot of corn. They, Dakota ethanol does now. So that's in the back of my mind. And they're not going to be able to sell that ethanol to states that require this low carbon footprint. And then we raise a lot of corn. If those folks that are making ethanol go out of business, our corn producers, our farmers are going to take a hit. And so there's also on the floor of the House, Representative Chase talked a lot about the carbon dioxide and the uses for it. Now, granted, the current pipelines being discussed and being built are a way to get rid of that CO2, but there are also a lot of other uses for it down the road, which I think are coming. And so I voted to kill this bill. I was in the minority. I think it doesn't focus on the future of South Dakota. We need to be a business-friendly state. So we need to be a business-friendly state. And if we got people that are coming in and spending billions of dollars, we can't really change the rules, I think, in the middle of the stream here. So that's why I was a no on it.
Anyone else would like to address this one? Senator or Representative Mills?
So I probably should give you the opposite perspective because I voted for it. To me, it was a landowner rights issue. To me, if you get to the heart of this issue, the product that we're shipping is something you and I are exhaling right now. Carbon dioxide, it's natural. It becomes unnatural when you compress it, and they want to compress it into 2,000 PSI, extreme pressures, and then run it through a network of pipes to go way up into North Dakota and do what? To bury it. And so there's no benefit to anyone from this product in this proposal. And so then I think, well, how's it being paid for? It's being paid for by our federal government using money they don't have. So they're borrowing it from my children and grandchildren and yours too. That doesn't make any sense at all to me. When we have problems we could be addressing right now that are real. So I just look at the fundamentals of what's happening here and think it's foolishness. It's coming out of Washington, D.C., and especially when it affects private landowners, it makes no sense.
Thank you. Anyone else? Senator?
Well, this actually hasn't formally arrived in the Senate, so we'll start to take a good look at this now, because I think our chamber had closed before theirs. Let's just talk about this a little bit when we look at this. And just to be clear, I'm not pro carbon pipelines, but I am pro South Dakota corn grower. And when you look at the future here, whether we like the market or we agree in the market, I would probably share some of the same ideas Representative Mills does. But that market exists, and it has existed for a long time. That's how the wind energy came here. That's how that markets came here. And it exists, and right now you have Senator John Thune thankfully leading the way for South Dakota on the next farm bill. And in that farm bill, it talks about what? Carbon credits. So if we're going to have carbon credits, what we have to do is make sure that the South Dakota corn grower and the South Dakota landowner is getting that money. And when we look at this, I look at two things. One, we're changing the rules at halftime. And I can tell you, in anything with economic development, certainly any other development, you change the rules on one of these folks after they go halfway through that. Whether it's building a house, if you're building a house and all of a sudden the permit changes on you halfway, you're not going to like it. So that's not the way we should be operating in South Dakota. You go through the rules, you check the boxes on all those rules, and we move forward. Second thing is we're talking about over $1 per bushel on this for our corn grower. So this isn't about somebody else getting rich. This is about South Dakotans being able to make money raising corn, and the second generation and the generation after that to be able to be here and to be able to make a living off that corn. And so that's really where I'm going to be at. And I've talked to all my buddies who raise corn in South Dakota. We've got young kids and want them to take over the farm. And they say, Casey, do what you can to make sure that corn stays at a higher price where we're at now. And if there's a way to make sure that corn will be worth more money in the future, we want you to do that too. And that's where I'll be on this.
Thank you. Any other comments? None? Okay,
Uh,
Roger?
Yeah, I should leave this alone. This is a very emotional bill out there. I wasn't there on Thursday because I was home with an issue that I needed to deal with, but I watched it on TV, and it really is big business versus the farmer on the blush, the first look at it, but it goes much deeper than that. The government has put millions of dollars into the pipe, or for people to put the pipeline in the ground, but the way the companies that put the pipeline in the ground make the difference, they make their money, is that states like California and pretty soon Minnesota and other states like that will pay more for a greener ethanol, and that's how they make their money. Now, if we don't go with this carbon compression and pump it up into North Dakota, our ethanol plants are not going to be in that green area, and that might. I talked to a guy that's building a jet fuel plant out here by DeSmet, and they probably are going to move out of South Dakota if they don't get this carbon pipeline in the ground, because they have to have that to get that federal difference in money that they get from their jet fuel or from their ethanol. So it's really a touchy subject, and I wasn't there to vote. I probably would have voted yes on it. But I listened to both sides, and neither side tells us the entire truth. I'll say that.
Anyone else? We'll move on to the next one. Next one is House Bill 1234, and apparently that one has to do with school vouchers. The questioner says that it basically is not in opposition to the South Dakota Constitution, Article 8, Section 16, which states that public support of sectarian instruction is prohibited. School vouchers, who would like to handle that one?
I could start with this one.
Thank you.
So we haven't seen this yet in the Education Committee, but it is scheduled for a hearing. And I have been, I've been pretty consistent about I don't support public monies going to private schools, so I will be voting against the bill. But we haven't yet heard the testimony for it on both sides.
I'll talk about school vouchers. I want to know the reason for the bill, and I'm on House Ed, and we're going to hear this bill on Wednesday. I'd like to know the reason for the bill. Is it because the school districts are not doing a fine job? Is that why we're going to put this bill out here? And this bill's also quite expensive. The first year out of the gate, and I'm just going to round, it's $20 million. The next year it's 40. The next year it's 60, and that's when it's all in full force. And it's going to be more than that, because they're figuring it on about $7,000 per student, which it costs an educated student in South Dakota right now. And that might be $8,000 by then. So instead of $60 million, it's probably $70 million. And my point is, where do we find that kind of ongoing money to support the voucher system? And I'm just going to throw a few things out, and I know I'm going to get carded here, but I think the premise is there's some people out in Pierre that think we don't do a very good job educating our kids. And I'm telling you what we do. I had an eye problem on last week, so I went to Twitterell here in town. He sent me to a gentleman in Sioux Falls who was educated in Pierre, got his undergraduate work in USD, did his graduate work or his doctorate degree in USD, all in South Dakota. And I can give you example after example, and if I have to get up on the House floor, I'm going to do it. The last 4 years in Brookings when I was superintendent, we were the highest testing ACT score in the state. I'm telling you, we do a good job. We need to keep our money going to public education. That's the backbone of South Dakota and the educational system. If you start pulling money off, pretty soon we're not going to have the system we have. Can we improve? Yes, we can. But as far as the voucher system goes, we're going to work really hard to defeat that in committee. But I think there's probably enough votes, and if you know, they can smoke it out. But I think we can beat it on the House floor as well. Thank you.
Anyone else comment? Senator?
Yeah, thanks. I would just like to make sure that we set the table for where we're really at in South Dakota so everybody knows. So in South Dakota, we have robust school choice. If you turn on TV right now, you're seeing other states start to catch up with where South Dakota really is. We have K-12 schools, right? That's where my kids go to. I'm very proud of the education that they're receiving there. We've got private schools with scholarship. So for those who are less fortunate, they can go to those private schools. That's put together by the state. And we have homeschool, okay? And we need to defend all of these. And you can move between the three of those with little to no restriction in South Dakota. It's up to the parents and the students to choose what's best for them. And that's the way it works here in South Dakota. So I think when we have this discussion, you first have to sit and say, where are we at today? And that's where we're at today. And we have to be careful, as Roger had mentioned. We've got to be careful with what we do when we look at funding different things. Because when you make a mistake when you're funding different things, that's how you end up in a state income tax. And there's probably only one thing that all of us can agree to up here, and that's that we want to stay away from state income tax.
Could I not? I just want to piggyback on something you said, and I have it in my notes here because I'm sure this is going to go to the floor, but people in South Dakota have a choice where to send their kids. They have public schools, which is required by the state constitution. They have all these alternative educations, which is homeschooling, private schools, unaccredited schools, accredited private schools, and that also we can send our kids through open enrollment. We can choose where we want our kids to go to school. So I think that's important that we look at the Constitution. It requires us to pay for one education, and that's it. And the other ones are just all about choice.
Thank you. Any other comments? All righty. Okay, we're going to move on to our next question. Basically, it's about House Bill 1080. A lot of questions, comments from people. If I read all these, I'd be here for another 20 minutes, so I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is basically 1080 is the transgender legislation, and we're going to allow each of you, everybody's asked how you supported and what your views were on all these. So we'll start with Mr. DeGroat, and we'll go right down the line and let each of you address House Bill 1080. Sorry to put you on the spot right away.
I'm just trying to put my thoughts in order here. I told you that the pipeline was an emotional issue in Pierre. Well, this by far was the most emotional issue, and hopefully we don't have to face another one like this. This is an issue that I really struggled with because I knew that a lot of my constituents back home really wanted me to defeat this bill. But I just want to say that, and this was really making it simple on my part. I'm a father of 3, a grandfather of 9. I have probably been in contact with more minor kids in my life than everybody else in this room. And I know that the adolescent brain has not developed the cognitive ability to make those kinds of decisions before they're a minor or before they're a major age of 18. I did not vote against their community. I did not vote against how they feel. I voted against when they can have it. And I would hope that at 19 or 18, when they're a major age, that if they still feel that way, they can do it. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
All right. Representative Herman.
Thank you. This was a very difficult bill. I heard it in House Health and also again on the floor. With this bill, I reached out to a large number of people and had a lot of conversations. I did a lot of reading. I talked to providers on both sides of the issue. I really listened intently to the testimony on both sides that day. And it is a difficult bill because you're talking about some government overreach into medical decisions and parental rights. And that's the part that makes this very challenging. What I heard in the testimony was 80% of cases of gender dysphoria resolve themselves naturally when able to progress through the phase of puberty on their own. 80%. And when I thought about those challenges to this bill, I also thought, we don't allow the same demographic of children to make other life-altering decisions either. We don't allow, smoking, drinking, tattoos. And what we're talking about with some of these procedures and therapies are long-term and irreversible decisions that I would not have been able to make for myself at that young of an age. And so when I looked at this bill, to me, I saw a chance to approach this with empathy, love, and compassion for children, and to just put a pause button on and give them the amount of time to make the decision for themselves when they turn 18 and they're able to progress through the phase of puberty on their own. So this was very difficult. The testimony was very compelling. I did vote in support of this bill in House Health and Human Services as well as on the floor.
Thank you. Senator Reed.
Thank you. The great comments that have been made so far. I also was on Health and Human Services when this first came up. I have an issue with the puberty blockers. I think that they should be allowed. I think it gives a tool that can be used to just put a little bit of a pause on what's going on for a child as they're working through the issue. I do not agree that they should have anything that's permanently done under 18, as has been said before. So it was a struggle. So I voted no in the committee, and then when it got to the floor, I did try to put an amendment on to take the puberty blockers out of the bill. In other words, make sure that they would be available. And I lost that. I lost that challenge or that amendment. I did not get it to pass. And so when it came right down to it, I voted for the bill because I do still feel strongly about the more what I feel are changes that can be irreversible. I was really concerned about. One thing I'll add to this is if when we have these issues, we have to make sure we're supporting mental health. We have to invest in mental health. And that's a great way of helping people because I don't want the suicides to happen. And so I think we need to continue to really work on every single time we can increase funding to mental health. And there's some good bills out there this year to do that, and I really hope that they'll be supported.
Thank you. Senator Crabtree.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments of my colleagues before me here. I think this is a fact on this. These are tough sometimes for folks. If you look at this, if you brought this to District 8, or if you brought this across South Dakota, and you ask them, do you think that minors should be able to have a surgery that is permanent and lasts them forever on a gender-altering surgery? The answer to that is overwhelmingly no. And to have that happen, in South Dakota, most would find that discussion to be a little alarming, right? So I think that's what we do. And when you look at this bill, I think if you take emotion out of it, okay, and we talked about a couple emotional things. So the way you handle these in the legislatures, you take the emotion out of it and you really dial in on the facts. And that's what I appreciate about all my colleagues. We dialed in on the facts of the day, and we voted to move this forward.
Thank you. Representative Rice.
Thank you. Everybody's kind of saying the things that I had down. It was a tough issue. I voted to support it. I probably have a unique perspective, unlike the rest of the folks on this panel, is that when I was called back to run the Department of Corrections for another 5 months there after I was out of retirement, this was an issue with inmates. Of course, it's different because all the inmates are over 18, but I think that certainly learned a lot about the struggles of folks that struggle with this. But again, and the state is supportive of that. It's not that the state is turning a blind eye to those issues, because I learned a lot by even during that 5 months as Department of Corrections and trying to help folks that struggle with these issues. And so, but again, that didn't apply to this bill. It's not addressed by this bill because this bill is for only people that were under 18. I might be a little unique as well because I've got a 17-year-old daughter. And although she doesn't struggle with this issue, some of the decisions that are made by folks that are not 18 seem to be on the shorter term of things and not thought all the way through. And so that wasn't a driving force for me. When I have tough bills, I always try to read the bill, read the words of the bill. If it's something that I support or that I can't vote against. And in this case, I supported the wording of the bill.
Thank you. Representative Mills.
Well, when you're last to speak, you don't have a lot to add. I think you've heard and probably gotten a sense that everybody struggled a little bit with this one. You know, we all come into these tough issues with a thought where we are. But one of the beauties of the legislature that isn't often available to the public unless they seek it is that we get exposed to both sides very, very clearly. And you have the opportunity to have your ideas tested against the other opinions. And I always reserve my final decision until I've heard every last word, because sometimes something has changed my mind. But I started out thinking that this bill was the right thing to do, and I ended up feeling even more convinced after I heard all the testimony. So I would encourage you, if you haven't, those things are recorded. In fact, on my drive home from Pierre, what day was that? They run together. Yesterday, Thursday night, I listened to the entire committee testimony on this bill in the Senate. So I've clearly heard both sides. And I think you all can do that as well. And I know it's a contentious issue here in Brookings, and I'm grateful that you're listening and attentive. And I hope you can sense how we all struggled with this issue, as we do with all of the big issues that we deal with.
Thank you. At this time, I've told the legislators I'd give them all 2 minutes to close and make their final remarks for us. So that's that time for them to do that. So again, before you leave, please understand that the legislators may stay around for a little bit afterwards if you have some questions for them, but understand that they spend a lot of time in Pierre and they're home for the weekend, and I really appreciate them being here to share their views and thoughts on all these bills. Obviously, we can't cover all of them. We covered quite a few here this morning. So with that, we'll start with, on the other end this time, with Representative Mills' closing comments.
Well, thank you. Thank you again for being attentive and listening. I know that each of you that's in the audience cares deeply about South Dakota, because you took time out of your Saturday to come down here and listen, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the chamber for setting it up and the professional and way that you conduct this. It just lends itself to good communication. I'm thankful for that. I think you know how to get a hold of us. Our email addresses are all our name.stlegislature.gov. We're getting hundreds a day right now, so bear with us. We try to sift through and figure out who's really from my district and who's from California. But anyway, I just want to say thank you. We live in a great state. We have big challenges. As you can sense from this table, we got great people that are working on them. And just pray for us, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Representative Reich.
Thanks. I echo John's comments. Thanks to the hosts here and to the people that showed up. A lot of times they used to have a thing that organizations are run by the people that show up. This really isn't an organization, but the people who show up that show that they care about what's going on. Oftentimes it's people that are unhappy with the way things are going that would show up at a thing like this, but that's okay too, because it helps us to understand better the opinions of the folks out of there. But at the end of the day, I represent the folks in District 8, and I go back to Thursday morning when I was on the floor and I was getting lobbied pretty hard by some of the folks on House Bill 1133. That's the pipeline bill, and I listened respectfully, and they made strong arguments. And finally I looked to him and said, you know what? Look at the sign here. Lake, Kingsbury, Minor, and Brookings. those are the people that I represent. You should go talk to those folks that represent you on the floor. And that's really what it comes down to for me, the biggest. Not that I'm not willing to listen to others, but I'm elected to represent the folks in District 8, as are the good gentlemen to my right and left. And that's really probably the most important thing for me. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Crabtree.
Well, thank you. I would say thanks for coming out. The same things. You know, it is truly an honor to serve all of you. Certainly the folks in District 8, but we also represent the entirety of South Dakota. And so I appreciate when you reach out. We aren't going to agree on every issue. My wife and I probably won't agree on where we eat dinner tonight after the kids' ball game. So that's the way life works, right? But I want you to know this, that I listen to you and I represent you. And what you tell me is what I bring forward. I don't always come with my own ideas, right? The best ideas don't come from Pierre. They come from you and they come from out here. And I listen to those ideas. I take all those into consideration. I listen to both sides. And then when I make my decision, I fight extremely hard for that. Because I know that represents you and our future generations. We want them to come here in South Dakota. We want them to have every opportunity we had, and we want them to be successful. And most importantly, we want them to raise our grandkids and future generations here. And that's what we want, and that's what I'll work for you every day. Reach out to me anytime. My cell phone's the one that's on the LRC. There's no staff that answers that. You're gonna get me, or you're gonna get my voicemail, and I will do my best to get back to you. Email, text are all ways to get a hold of me as well. And then thank you for the honor to serve all of you.
Thank you, Senator Reed.
Thank you, and to everybody for attending today and all the emails. Keep them coming. I will say that if you ever get on a website that sends you an email, says, hey, you can do this, and sends an email, you get so many of those, and they're just all the same, and it's so hard to kind of keep track of where people are at. So the personal messages, the personal emails work a lot more. I always tell this, kind of a funny story that happened. I got a postcard on an issue one day, and it was, kind of, here's what I think you should do. And it was signed by a gentleman, and then below it was his wife, who said, I totally disagree with my husband. And there's the legislature right there, and one card. She got a hold of it before it got to the mailbox and let me know what she thought. So, but it's an honor to serve out there. I've enjoyed it. This is, especially District 7, it's great to represent you out there. I think we're a great community, and really like to hear from you on what you're thinking with issues.
Representative Herman.
I'd like to thank everyone also, especially for all the encouraging notes and support. It's very meaningful when we're out there in Pierre and away from our families to be able to hear from everybody. And even if you disagree, send them all. But please note where you're from. We've gotten a couple of emails where it said, I'm your constituent. And then at the bottom, it was like, just kidding, I'm from Rapid. So do let us know where you're from. It really helps, and we pay attention to those. In fact, after I collect all the emails, I try to sort by Brookings to try to get back to everybody from Brookings. And so it's a big job, but I do attempt to get back to everybody. I have some exciting bills that I'm working on this year. I've been happy to support some mental health bills to go through, to put funding toward those, especially with a youth mental health focus, because I know that is a crisis in our area. I am also able to support and carry a bill that came right from our district. So if you are thinking of something, I agree wholeheartedly that the answers never come from the top. The answers come from the people that are closest to the problem. So if you're close to a problem and you're seeing something and you want to talk about it, reach out to me. I would love to talk through what that might look like, what a bill could look like, and the process for how we would draft and structure that. So thank you again. I appreciate everyone coming out.
Thank you. Representative DeGroot.
I will keep it brief. I can't say it any better than what you've heard here. I just want to thank you folks for all coming out. And there's a term I used I learned in Pierre. It's called Me Too. And Me Too for what all they said. But I want to point out 3 bills real quick, and you can look them up. Senate Bill 41 put $200 million into the system and to build houses, infrastructure for homes. That's really, really good for Brookings. We've been waiting for that money for over a year. Senate Bill 11 09. I think this is Senator Reed bill, which is it's a business improvement district where right now motels can charge $2 a night. The bill went through the House, and it increases to either $4 a night or 4%, whichever the bid district wants to do. It's a great thing for Brookings. It goes into, and please talk to him afterwards because it's great for Brookings. And the other bill that I just want to briefly talk about is House Bill 1011, and that's that opportunity scholarship. And I think our ex-senator, congressman over here had a great deal to do with that in the past. We increased that fund from $6,500 to $7,500. And what's really great about this, if South Dakota kids come to school here, 70% of those kids, they go to school here, stay here. So anyway, thanks for coming. It's fun out there. I've learned a ton. First 2 weeks, I didn't even want to go back, and now I can't wait to go back on Monday. So thank you for being here.
All right. Again, thank you to all the legislators. Please give them a round of applause. We have some closing comments from our chamber director.
Yes, thank you so much. Just a reminder, we have a second legislative coffee taking place February 25th here in this room with District 7. And then also, Michael said that the legislators will be here for a few minutes. At about 11:15, we will start ushering people out of the building just so that the city staff can get home to their families on this weekend day. So 10:15, not 11:15. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you all. Have a great day and a great weekend. And I don't know if it's go Chiefs or go Eagles. Well, whichever one wants the Super Bowl.